Welcome to the Breath of God. This is a YouTube channel dedicated to studying the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. At the Breath of God, we've reached more than 17,000 people with the gospel of Jesus, and those numbers have nearly doubled in the last few days to 33,000 people. Therefore, I've opened up a secure online link for giving. If you would like to give to the ministries at the Breath of God, just go to the link at the top of my YouTube page. I'm specifically looking for 3 partners that'll give $3,000 each so that I can donate my time to these broadcasts. Thank you. And today's teaching, the rapture. So in the rapture, we're going to cover the word, harpazo, the imagery, and the doctrine. So the word rapture has been hotly debated by many Christians, and in fact, people argue that you can't find rapture in the Bible. In a way, they're right. Harpazo is the Greek word that was translated by Jerome in 405 BC into Rapamir. And then Rapamir was then translated into English as rapture. So, from Greek to Latin to English. And Jerome's translation was very highly regarded among the ancient scholars and even today as being one of the most accurate translations of the Bible. And Jerome translated the language of the Bible from Greek, Hebrew, and Aramaic into Latin because he wanted the people of his day to be able to read the Bible and understand it in their own language. It's actually Vulgate, or the vulgar, which means common, the common tongue. So let's take a look at the word harpazo. So you find the word harpazo in the New Testament 16 times in 13 verses. And I'm going to read a few of those verses so you can get an understanding of the context in which harpazo is used. So, Matthew chapter 11, verse 12. And from the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven suffereth violence, and the harpazo take it by force. Or again, in Matthew 13, verse 19. This is the parable of the sower. When one heareth the word of the kingdom and understandeth it not, then cometh the wicked one, and harpazo that which was sown in the heart. And then, if I read a little bit further to John 10:29, my Father which gave them to me is greater than all. No man can harpazo them out of my Father's hand. And then I'll just read one more from 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 4. And this is Paul explaining how he knew a man who was caught up to the third heaven. And he writes, how that he was harpazo into paradise and heard unspeakable words, which is not lawful for a man to utter. So 16 times, 13 verses, you have the word harpazo, which is the word rapture, which was originally translated from the Greek. And then you have the imagery of the rapture. You find Jesus talking about the rapture using very powerful imagery from the Jewish culture. So he talks about the rapture in the context of betrothal and marriage. So in John chapter 14, verses 1 through 3, he talks about, I'm going to my Father's house to prepare a place for you, and I will come back for you. That is the language of betrothal. And he also does this in the parable of the 10 virgins in Matthew 25, verses 1 through 13. He talks about the 10 virgins, 5 being wise and 5 being foolish. And they're waiting for the bridegroom to come, and they don't know when the bridegroom will come. And then you see him using the language of the Jewish feast. He talks about the day and the hour which is not known, which is a Jewish idiom for the Feast of Trumpets, which is the only feast in the Bible, which no one knew the day or the hour, because the feast was called when someone would see the first sliver of the new moon. And then finally, you find Jesus referencing the rapture as coming like a thief in the night to snatch away someone's possessions. And you find this in Luke chapter 12, verses 39 through 46, and Matthew 24, verses 42 through 44. So you have the imagery of betrothal, the feast, and the thief that Jesus himself uses to speak about the rapture. And then finally, you have the doctrine of the rapture. You find this in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 35 through 58, when Paul talks about the resurrection body, which we'll receive in the flash, in the twinkling of the eye. The dead in Christ will rise, and we will put on immortality. And you find this also in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 13 through 18, about the Lord will descend from heaven with a loud trump, and the dead in Christ will rise first. And those of us who are still alive will be caught up, harpazo, in the air to meet the Lord, and we will be with him forever. And then Paul goes on to say, you should encourage each other with these words. This is the blessed hope. You should be encouraged. The Lord is coming back. He is coming back for his bride. And then finally, you see this in Revelations chapter 4. You see the open door and a voice speaking like a trumpet. Again, referring back to the Feast of Trumpets. And he says, come up here. And then from that point on, John is taken up into heaven. And you see in the book of Revelation, the church is mentioned 19 times in chapters 1 through 3. But after that, the church is not mentioned again in the entire book of Revelation until the very last verses of the last chapter in the Bible. And this is because the church will not be present during the tribulation. So the term church is really important to understand. Jesus was very clear, I will build my church. The church is his ecclesia and his bride. And we are waiting for our bridegroom, and we are to be about his business and occupy until he comes. So there you have it. You have the rapture, the word, harpazo, the imagery, and the doctrine of the rapture. I hope you enjoyed this teaching at the Breath of God. And if you like this, please subscribe and comment. Thank you. And remember, his breath is our calling.